My name is Kenny Dyal, and I want to welcome you to Season 3 of the Scuba Diving Podcast. Finally, Red Sullivan, the long-awaited, provocative, very experienced gear service technician for over 30 years with every line. He services gear from all around the world. He salvages boats, planes, helps sink artificial reefs, including the very famous Vandenberg off Key West. He's pulled aircraft off the bottom, goes into pipes and gets things. He's taught everything from open water up to cave and rebreather. He may come across as tough and strong-opinioned, and that may be true, but I've known him for a long time. Once you get through that, thick skin, very nice guy, loves what he does. My gosh, several of the sound bites from Red have gotten into the millions on our TikTok and Instagram. If you're a gear junkie, you like wild stories, if you like knowing what's really going on with equipment, this interview is for you. So this is one of a couple of parts. This is all about Red, talking about gear, puke and regulators, spiders and regulators, how to clean your gear, P-valves, peeing in wetsuits, dry suits, what's all of that, what's his favorite regulator, does he have a favorite? This was an experience for me, and I hope it's an experience for you. I hope you really enjoy this show. You do seem like you're very worried about other people's opinions.
No, I'm not.
I didn't think so. But that's why we're here. You give it to me straight. You've been doing this a long time, but thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much.
You've been teaching, salvaging, sinking reefs, swimming through gas, and people send in their gear to be serviced by you from all over the world, so you've seen just about everything under the sun. Yeah. Is there an opinion that you've had when you started servicing gear to right now that has done a 180, like totally flipped?
The engineers from the manufacturers have lost their ever-loving mind.
Why is that?
They're trying to reinvent the bubble. You know, I mean, it's micro adjustments, this adjustment, that adjustment. It's a gimmick to sell the regulators instead of having, I mean, I understand it if a regulator looked the same from 1980 to now, but it worked. And you didn't have to buy a new purge cover every year. This new soft purge cover, you know, when you push it down and try to twist it off, now you're selling the customer something that has just degraded from the salt, the heat, the sun, the diesel fuel. You know, the fumes, it just dissolves. And now you're charging your customer another $24.99 for a purge cover.
So you're saying it's basically the same technology, but all the little cosmetics have made it more expensive to...
They would be really impressive if they would just come out with a hoseless second stage.
A Bluetooth second stage?
That's it, man. Then you could fill online.
One thing that kind of went viral on our last interview was dip tanks. And that's a rinse tank on a boat typically, because people were saying, what's a dip tank? It's not called that everywhere, I guess. So the dip tank is the rinse tank, usually on a bucket. And there's usually two. One's for cameras and stuff, and the other one's for
your gear. That's for basic in your camera or your computers. I mean, I'll throw my computer, when I come up from a dive, I throw my computers in the camera bucket because it doesn't have anything that's going to hurt the cameras.
Right.
And I like to keep my computers fresh.
Yeah.
You know, because that way the salt's not in the button, especially if they're button activated.
You don't use the other dip tanks or the rinse buckets?
No, I go down the dock and get the hose.
And why is that?
Because people pee in their wetsuits, man, and you're following it right up, man. You're dipping everything in their pee. And you pee in your wetsuit. So everybody's got pee in their wetsuit. The people that say they don't pee in their wetsuit are either liars or they're really hurting themselves by forcing themselves not to pee.
Well, I interviewed the director of NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab, the head scientist there, and he said if you're not peeing when you get in the water, that's unnatural.
It's a natural thing. You know, I mean,
you've heard the saying, there's divers that pee in their wetsuits and there's divers that lie about peeing in their wetsuits. So let me take a moment to address all the divers out there. Peeing in your wetsuit is a physiologic response. It is a normal thing. It's called immersion diuresis. Going pee when you get in the water is a normal thing. It's a physiologic response. Do not worry about it. It happens to all of us.
I could just brush the neoprene against my leg and I got to go pee.
Dude,
you know,
like
I mean, start messing with my gear. It's time to go pee.
Oh, yeah. When I get that aquarium, I'm just, as soon as I'm in, oh gosh.
But I've come to the conclusion that, you know, when I was teaching a lot and they came out with the P-valve, I put it in every one of my suits because I got tired of sitting in it all day. So now I got a little tube that hangs down below my foot.
You have a P-valve in your suit?
Yep. All my suits have a P-valve.
How does that work?
You just strap on a condom catheter and plug it up. I usually tell my students, you see this barb on here? It just goes in, and if you're worried about it popping out, get a zip tie.
You wait.
And they're like, that's why you're so angry.
Dude.
You got to wash them. You know, I mean, in a wetsuit, they don't need to be balanced because the suit's wet. It's just a tube with a nipple on it, and it hooks up to the cat. Lasts all day.
And it's just like a plunger that goes on the end of...
No, it's just like a condom. Instead of a reservoir to catch the stuff that males have, instead of catching it, it's got a tube, and you just hook the tube up and push the thing past the barb, and it works.
Okay.
Dry suits, man, best thing since pockets.
Why don't we see these being sold in dive shops?
They are. You're just not going to the right shop.
Oh, so it's behind the counter. Hey, I need one of those. Okay, and ready to do this all the time. You see regulators come in from everybody all over the world all the time.
Yep.
What is your number one pet peeve?
Acid reflux.
What's that?
That's the shit you throw up in your regulator and leave it there. You do know people, you could wash your regulators and you wouldn't have that in your regulator.
So you're saying people are throwing up in their regulators?
It's acid reflux. They work real hard. They'll eat before they dive. They get that vurp. It goes in and it just stays there. Basically, it eats the plastic regulators. It etches them. It never comes out again. No matter how much I wash them, I can't bleach them because then the plastic will absorb the bleach and you'll be swearing that I'm trying to kill you. That's why when I dive real contaminated water, I'm back to a metal regulator. I use a 108 Scuba Pro. I take it apart, throw it in a bucket of bleach, and it's gone. All the contamination is gone. It doesn't take me no time to clean up my stuff.
But you can't bleach
You can't
the
bleach
plastic regulators.
No, the graphite or the composite or whatever the hell they're making it out of. Because it'll absorb it, just like it absorbs the puke. I've opened some up that looked like somebody just spread smoothie peanut butter all up inside of it. It's disgusting. And then when it hits the hot water, it's even better.
Because you get the smell?
Oh, yeah.
Ugh.
But the best thing I've ever found inside of a regulator was lizard eggs. It was from South Florida. They used to keep the regulators on their back deck. A little gecko decided to go up inside this girl's second stage. It was her E02 reg that she didn't use much. And she sent it to me to have it serviced. I opened it up and I seen 2 little eggs sitting in there. So I took them out very gently and I put them in a plastic bag because I was going to send them back to her. And I guess they were really close because the plastic bag incubated them. And when I took them back to the shop, one of them hatched.
And he survived?
Yeah, he lived. We put him out in the woods.
Out there running around eating bugs as we speak.
Yep,
Maybe.
hopefully.
So your biggest pet peeve is people
They just don't
acid
maintain their,
reflux,
yeah, they just
not
don't,
rinsing their
they're not
regulator.
rinsing out their second stage.
Okay.
And I can always tell when I get somebody's gear if they soak it or not. Soaking it without pressure on it is the worst thing you can do because your SPG has no pressure on it. The threads leak because it's everything's an O-ring seal, and without pressure on it, the O-ring's not sealing anything because that's what the O-ring does. You've seen it. You've worked on stuff. You take the SPG off and it's green and you can't get the air spool out. That's because somebody soaked it. And soaked it and soaked it and soaked it.
So you're saying it's a bad idea to take your reg, even if you put the dust cap in, and just soak it for a long period of time in the water?
I can come home from a salvage and my gear gets washed before I eat or I take a shower or anything because I may be called out in an hour to go do it again or tomorrow morning. It's happened. That's my livelihood. So that hose right there is right off my hot water heater. It's hot water. I wash everything in a 5-gallon bucket. I start off with a computer, mask, my dive helmet, flashlights, anything like that. I throw it in the bucket. I hit it with hot water. Then I put fresh water in and I do it again. And I'm done in 15 minutes. I'll leave the regulator on the tank under pressure, crank the tank wide open. Why would I waste it? I got to fill it anyway. I take the nozzle to the hose, I stick it right in the mouthpiece, and I blast it. Everything goes out the exhaust. I purge it a couple bits to get the thing all agitated in there.
Pressurized?
Yeah, with pressure on it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's got 100% pressure. I stick it in the mouthpiece, and I just let that hot water go inside that regulator, and it washes everything that my body put in it and whatever else decided to go in it out. When I've washed all the regs out, I wash down the stuff on the outside. I'm going to fill the tank anyway, so I usually purge the second stage until they're dry. That way there's nothing on the seats. There's nothing in the hose. I love taking hoses apart, and then as soon as you take the second stage off and you let the hose fall, you got a puddle of water on the floor because they soak. I've had tech divers, rebreather divers, bring me their bailout, and they're like, there's something wrong with it, I don't understand it. I hook it to the IP gauge, and it filled up my gauge with seawater because the person didn't have their reg on to begin with, and it's just, you can't take a regulator underwater that deep and not have air on, or it will flood.
So if you bring a regulator down, like let's say on a bailout bottle or a deco bottle, and it's not pressurized,
It'll leak.
it's filling with water,
Yep.
even if you think that it's sealed.
Yes. If you equalize your ears, you should reach over and turn your valve on and then turn it off again. Because as you go down, the pressure is going to decrease in the bottle in that saved space because there's not a lot of volume there. You turn it on, you turn it off, you look at the gauge. This way you know you've got gas. And then you're not leaving it on, because if you leave it on, I've seen it, they lose the second stage where it's back there going
Yep.
and they go to use what they need and it's gone. We call that lost gas. Now you're going to be doing extra deco on back gas.
You see all different lines, the parts inside and everything.
Yep.
And so when you're looking at all these different gear lines together, and people get very passionate about their lines, and most people don't actually know what's behind them,
Yep.
or the manufacturers are actually from the same people and they hate one and love the other. Does that make you more loyal to a one brand, or does that make you realize it's like...
I basically dive Scuba Pro because if I'm doing some things, I dive the Scuba Pro Mark 25. If I'm cave diving or something like that, I dive the Mark 25. I like the way it works. I will not dive anything other than a 1980 G250 second stage. That is it. You can't. There's parts of that today you can't get. If you ruin the exhaust diaphragm, they're no longer around unless you know somebody. And that somebody holds a lot of them dear to his heart.
Are they within 20 yards of us right now?
Probably. And then they also have the chrome cap that went over a piece of rubber with the little S. And those are all ate up now and you can't buy them. I use the graphite G250 for the simple fact that it's very simple to work on. It requires basically nothing. I could take it apart underwater. Yeah, I don't really need any fancy stuff. It breathes better than anything I've ever had. And I've used a lot of regulators.
So I've seen the piston first stages, and then the ones with about 4,000 little diaphragm parts in there.
Okay, you have your piston first stage and you have a diaphragm first stage. The piston regulator is like a two-stroke. You literally could take that off underwater and put it on another tank, and it will push all the water out of it, other than fill up your SPG. But you'll live. You try that with a diaphragm, that's like a four-stroke. It doesn't pass the water. It's got so many little places for the water to stay, and it won't pass. And then your IP goes up high because the water's dense and it affects the IP.
This is getting a little tech for the listeners here. IP is intermediate pressure, and that's pressure between the first stage down to the second stage.
Breathing pressure.
Breathing pressure. That first stage brings your tank pressure way down to 135 plus or minus.
Correct.
And then your second stage brings it to whatever ambient demand
Right.
that you need.
You can't breathe 3,000 PSI. What we call the first stage is actually, in real layman's terms, a regulator, because it's regulating your tank pressure down to breathing pressure.
So it brings it down from crazy to, all right, now we just tweak it with the second
and
stage.
that thing you stick in your mouth is just a stage.
Yeah. All right. There we cleared that up for anybody who's wondering, what is this IP? What are y'all even talking about?
Right.
A big question on my feed I get is, hey, what is the best cylinder or tank or bottle if they're commercial? You know, what's the best one? And, you know, first of all, there is going to depend on where you're going, your environment, what you're using for. And so people go, should I go high pressure or low pressure steel? Most people eventually get to steel.
Okay.
But
you
then
made
they
a
say
good point.
High pressure or low pressure?
It isn't about the pressure. It's about the volume. I can take a steel 72, has 72 cubic feet of gas at 2250 versus an aluminum 80 that actually only has 78 cubic feet of gas at 3000 PSI. There lies the problem. Most cave divers that dive low pressure will not dive with a cave diver with high pressure because we have what we call dissimilars. How much gas does your bottle hold at this pressure compared to my bottle at that pressure?
So I think the people that do understand the fill pressure at what volume, they're then saying, okay, so I understand the difference between high pressure and low pressure. What do you suggest? Like, why would I go with one over the other?
I would always tell my students to go with a low pressure bottle, because if you go to the Keys, you're still going to get a good fill. You go to the Keys with the working pressure and volume is at 3,500, and by the time they fill it to 3,200 and it cools to 28,
Yeah.
you're on the sucky end of that deal.
Yeah.
To where I go roll in there and they go, oh, it's 2640, and they fill it to 3,000 hot, and I come out happy because I got a full bottle.
Yeah.
You know, so it's volume.
The next one is size. So some people I've seen so they're more on the recreational side. They'll get the high pressure 100, which is like almost a small 80 because it's got that same diameter. And they're like, I'm fine if it's not quite full. I'm still over 80, but I got this little They're small.
My other 3, they're high pressure 72s. They're almost the same diameter as the 85, but they're about that much shorter. They're great for diving in to raise a small boat because I don't have to lug that big bottle around.
Right.
And I can slither into places
Yeah.
if I have to because it's smaller.
Sounds to me like, realistically, from everything you've said and everything we've experienced cumulatively, understand what they mean and then find the one that fits what you're using it for.
It's a tool. You know, you don't use a Phillips on a straight bladed screw. People ask me all the time, do you side mount? I do if I'm going into a small cave. Do you no mount? I do if I'm going into a small pipe. I use an umbilical. You know, it's all a tool.
Yeah, you know, it seems like, and you probably get this all the time. I get it constantly on my pages. What do you dive with? What do you use? And it's like, possibly.
What am I doing?
Exactly. and it's like the biggest thing, and we've said this, and I think you've even commented on these posts, where when you're looking for advice with gear, the first question the person should ask you is, what are you using it for?
Correct. And as an instructor, when I was teaching open water, that was my big pet peeve with all my students. Why are you wanting to learn to dive? Are you going to be a 4 or 5 times a year diver? Are you going to grow in the sport? Are you going to go further on? There lies a good instructor that knows what to recommend. I never sold gear. I always recommended gear that they could grow in the sport with. And I'd always tell my youngins, look, if mom and dad's fitting the bill for some of this, have them buy you the most expensive, perfectly good regulator that they'll buy because it'll last you your lifetime. You'll outgrow a wetsuit, you'll wear out a BC, you'll wear out your fins, you'll wear out your booties and all that. Have them buy you your regulator. It'll last, and you'll always have that thought that my parents bought me this.
Sounds to me, actually, that's something we haven't brought up before. That's a good one. Most people, if they're like us, we're on a limited budget.
Correct.
And once you've kind of established how much and where you're going to be diving, all those other things wear out and they get old. They do. The only thing you can continuously service, at least for typically a long time.
If you buy a quality one, you don't want to buy this, the knockoff stuff. Because,
regulators.
Right, because there's no parts for them anymore.
Right.
Cressy's bad for that, Sealy.
I get asked a lot why people can't service their own regulators. That's a common question I get. They're like, hey,
I know, you can put brakes on your car and fail and run over 15 kids and not be liable. In the scuba industry, you can service your own stuff if you can find somebody that'll give you the parts. Are you going to invest in the money to have the specialty parts for that particular regulator, or are you going to be that technician that's digging the shit out with an O-ring pick and scarring your stuff up?
Typically, with most lines, you're going to need at least a few tools.
I got thousands of dollars of different manufacturers' tools.
Just for any gear, you're going to need a few tools, right?
Mm-hmm. The metric adjustable is not going to work all the time.
It doesn't sound like it's really, if you're just servicing your 1 or 2 lines every couple of years, it doesn't sound like it's worth the money.
Well, it's not, because you're not doing it every day. I love going to stores. It's a pet peeve of mine to go and then go look at the tech shop. And you'll see the new text. Almost every manufacturer gives an O-ring sheet. They lay it out and they dump out their O-rings and they set them on top of the little pitchers. Now, somebody that's been doing this for over 30 years, I take the regulator all apart. I throw all the parts in a little square Tupperware thing, and that goes back to the customer. Then I take the kit, I just dump it out. The bench over is the assembly side of my bench.
The new stuff.
The new stuff. I just dump it out over there. It's still in a pile, and I just start building the regulator. I know what O-ring goes where and how it goes and everything. I don't size up. I don't need to. I've been doing it too long. But it's comical to watch. They get flustered when somebody moves something.
But to be fair, I mean, you got to start somewhere, right?
You do. This is that guy that wants to work on his own stuff. If you're not doing it every single day, why invest that much time just to say, I did it myself?
Well, it costs you more money, it takes time, and you probably are still going to... So I'm authorized in almost all the lines, right? Taking all the classes, I have my own stuff, I have a rental fleet. Guess how much of that I service? I do not open up my regulators. Because I know better. If you've been doing it long enough, you know that I bring it to someone who has been doing this a long time, who I'm staring at right now.
I've asked Scuba Pro many times. When I started working on Scuba Pro regulators, they used to have the master's class. What they did is they would take a regulator, a first stage apart, and put it in a brown paper bag, and then they would throw some other parts in it. And they would set the egg timer out, and everybody would build a regulator. And then they would have to label the spare parts, what they went to. I won it 3 years in a row, and that's when they stopped. First year, I got a titanium watch, I got a titanium regulator, and then I got a hat.
See, I would rather that guy service my regulator. So people ask me why the manufacturers don't sell the parts to the public.
Liability. You can thank the attorneys for that and insurance companies for that.
I get asked, hey, can I just buy parts for this? I want to just mess with this on my own. Why won't the shops let me? Why does it matter once I take it? And why is that a liability, but other things you buy from there are not?
Because the manufacturer, all these big conglomerates, they're more like hedge companies. And they say the parts don't go because that guy could put it in backwards and kill himself. And now we're liable.
Well, they put the person they're next to in danger too.
Correct. You buy an Edge regulator, it's a Hog.
Hog, yeah.
Edge Hog. You can take their service class online. They'll sell you parts. And it's the same regulator that Dive Gear Express sells. It's made by Hog, rebadged to Dive Gear Express. They sell parts to the common person.
Why wouldn't somebody that wants to service their gear just buy one of those?
They can, but I've worked on those regulators because they've brought them to me. I have pictures of where people took a hammer and tried to make that piston shorter because they got tired of their IP going up. I will show you what you did wrong. I'm not going to teach you, but I will show you what you did wrong. The industry won't allow me to teach. Before the attorneys got involved, the guy that had the master's card in with Scuba Pro could teach people in the store, and we're not even allowed to do that. They have to attend their own class. One thing that really is interesting is when you watch people get on the boat, they set up their gear and they turn their tank on and they got a 2-hour ride and their tank's on. That is just...
You're saying
that
when they
regulator
get on the boat,
is meant to do this. In and out, in and out, in and out. It's not meant to sit and hold forever, especially in the heat.
So you're saying don't leave your stuff pressurized any longer than you have to.
Check it out. By all means, check your pressure. You never know if you blew a burst disc on the way down or if it's a rental tank, it might have a short load.
You're saying turn it back off and take some of that pressure out of it.
Purge it down. Before you strap into your gear, there's 2 things you have to do. You have to turn the tank on and take the bungee off because you can't take the boat with you.
We've all done it. Have you ever done that?
Yes.
So have I. Oh, you know, something that riled people up the last time you said it is you said the dive masters like to come in and claim that spot every day on the back of the boat where the diesel's billowing, the exhaust.
Yep.
You said it kills regulators.
And I listened to some of that. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. If you have a hard-shelled second stage, you know, something doesn't need to be replaced, it doesn't bother it. But it will gum up the clear diaphragm. The clear diaphragms gum up more than the black ones.
That's the same thing with masks, too, I noticed.
Yes. I will not dive a clear mask for 2 reasons. I don't like to look at mold. And I don't like all that sunlight. To me, a black skirt is like sitting in my truck with all the tinted windows and I'm looking out the windshield.
You know what I tell people in the shop? Watching TV with all the lights and windows open or with all the lights out.
Exactly.
The reason
Same
they
thing.
darken theaters.
And plus your eyes will dilate to that, but they can't do that with a clear mask.
I think people think they're going to see more, which you're not.
To be honest with you, the reason why I dive a frameless is because it sits so close to my face. I used to be a 3-window mask. I had the mask, a metal bar, and then windows.
I know which ones you're talking about.
And
it looked like an aquarium on
yes,
your
it
face.
was an aquarium. It
But-
took about 4 breaths to clear it.
There's an evolution as you use masks. I think we all started with, I want clear so I can see everything, and I want side windows so I can see next to me. And it's a reasonable thought, but it's not how it really works.
And the Scuba Pro rep gave me a frameless mask, and he says, I want you to take this to your next class. I want you to put your people the way you do with your thing you wear, and then I want you to take it off and then put the frameless on and tell me what you see. And I was like, okay. Well, I seen everybody here, and I could see over here. And so I actually could see more.
And there's less volume.
And there's less volume, and it was so much more comfortable.
Stuff it in your foot pocket.
And so when you buy the cheaper masks and the skirt is real thick, they only work on young people because they ain't got no wrinkles yet. The gray hairs, man, you could build a building on top of them bitches and they don't bend. They'll flood a mask in a heartbeat just constantly.
Yeah, I know.
The gray hair sucks.
Yeah, we deal with it.
Yeah, we deal with it.
And I always say, you know, black mask is more supple than clear, and there's some with that gummy bear layer, and you can put chaps and you do all those things, but I said eventually you get to the point where you just deal with it.
Well, I like a little water in my mask. That way I don't have to I can just go like that if it starts to fog. There again, the older I am, I need readers so I can look at my computer. And a frameless mask doesn't come. You can buy those little static things. I was in Roatan one year and I was clearing the mask and I watched my little bifocal float out of the mask and it was going around and I was just like, I gotta find another way. So I use Dive Optics. They bond it. I send them the mask. I draw a line where I want them and she bonds them in. So it comes back. I love them, man.
Well, Red, you've seen every piece of gear under the sun, used it, broke it, had it almost try and drown you at some point.
Yep.
What's one thing you'd like to leave with our entire audience?
Wash your gear. Don't soak it, wash it. If you don't own your own tank, go find a pony bottle. You can get probably 2 or 3 washings out of a good 19 cubic foot pony bottle. Wash all your gear while it's under pressure. The soaking is just a waste of time. Even wetsuits. I wash my wetsuit in a 5-gallon bucket. I fill it up with hot water, I pull it up from the neck, and all that water runs through, and I wash my suit inside out. I don't care what the outside looks like. It doesn't touch me. I dry it from the inside out because I want the part that touches me dry.
And clean and know what's on it.
Right. You know, I mean, a lot of people, they get off the boat and they're taking their suit off and they're putting it back the way it should be, and I'm just like, leave it inside out. The inside is what touches you, and that's where you peed.
One last question. You ever found spiders in the second stage regulators?
Yeah, I got tons of pictures of spiders in the second stage. Spiders, cockroach eggs, you name it.
How do you prevent that?
The funny part is that I would literally get regulators with a sandwich bag over the mouthpiece and a rubber band around it. And I was just like, they don't like bugs. So you take it apart and you see the roach egg in there. They go through the exhaust valve. If you want to protect it, put the whole regulator in a plastic bag and figure out how to get a rubber band around the hose only.
The hose?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's the only way you're going to protect it. That, or...
And you better have your dust cap in too.
And don't store it in the regulator bag. I can't get mad at the dive shops for trying to make money. It's the game. You got to have this, man. It's the best thing in the world.
There's some fun to buying things.
And, oh yeah, but I got a garage full of shit I don't use. The best thing for anybody starting to learn is find an instructor that is honest and you click with. And then tell them what kind of diving that you think you're going to get into. And let that person recommend, not tell.
You don't have a house, you've got a compound, a scuba gear.
I had one of my buddies
salvage.
come over and goes, damn it, man, this looks like a redneck dive shop.
It's bigger than a dive shop. Well, first of all, Red, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, anytime.
Again.
Anytime.
I appreciate it. Fun as always, good stuff. I learned something every time. Let's take a look around.
Okay.
Sweet. All right. If you want to support my channel, go to sweetwaterscuba.com. We have all the good stuff like the shirts, the hats, the stickers, everything. Autographed kids' books are on there and wholesale opportunities for retailers. Don't forget, we're on almost every major channel, put out daily content, new stuff all the time. I'm on live all the time, so hopefully I'll see you on either TikTok, Kenny_Dyal, Instagram, Sweetwater_Scuba, Facebook, just search me, or just search me in your browser, Kenny Dyal. One of those should come up. Finally, the YouTube channel has all the podcasts and all of the short form stuff. It actually kind of has everything in one spot. Either way, I hope to see you on one of these apps, on one of these pages. Whatever connects us to the underwater world, I hope to see you there. Let's show the rest of the world the rest of the world.